The Chris Johnston Show featuring Cobourg's very own Chris Johnston alongside me. We're going to be at Boston Pizza COBOURG on 1111 Elgin Street West on January 17th for a live podcast recording. I am super excited for this. I'm over the moon.
Yeah, it's going to be so cool. I mean, a Friday night. What else are you doing? You're going to Boston Pizza. They've recently completed a renovation. It was already the place to go anyway if you want to watch a game, dine with your family. It's the spot. And on Friday, January 17th, you can see Steve Dangle, Adam Wilde, Julian McKenzie, Chris Johnston, and a whole host of other characters. We're going to have a meet and greet. We're going to have some banters, tell some stories. I bet Cobourg Papa will make an appearance too.
I can't wait to meet Cobourg Papa for the first time. Doors will open at 5. The podcast will start at 6, and then we'll be able to meet you guys after that episode has been recorded. It's an exclusive ticketed event with limited capacity. First come, first serve for tickets and tables, which we will be filling to capacity. Secure your ticket now. Event is sold based on seat, not table. Therefore, you may be required to sit with other groups, but still, you can make friends with everyone there. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be great. Get your tickets now for the live CJ show in Cobourg, January 17th.
Let's go Cougars.
The Chris Johnston Show.
Let's go!
Your number one destination for a behind-the-scenes look at the game of hockey.
Is this thing on?
Here's NHL insider Chris Johnston and host Julian McKenzie.
CJ, I don't normally start with stick taps at the beginning, but I want to give a stick tap to everyone who bought tickets for the live show on Friday at Boston Pizza COBOURG. It is sold out.
We got a full house.
Someone on Blue Sky said that this is the biggest event in Cobourg since like Blue Rodeo played in Cobourg. Does that band resonate with you?
Well, I know the band Blue Rodeo. I didn't realize they had played Cobourg, so that is that's a pretty big draw. That was much bigger than us, but yeah, that's cool. I mean, I guess not a lot of events are coming there. I'm glad we're going to be there, and especially in January, we're going to try to bring some warmth to a frosty night in Ontario's feel-good town.
Oh, we absolutely will. Be there 5 o'clock. 6. We'll start the podcast at 6, but like be there from 5 because the vibes will be effervescent.
And I'm eating pizza for dinner that night, guaranteed.
I mean, I expect nothing less.
Book it.
I expect nothing less. I can't wait, man. Doing live shows with you, Siege, is an absolute pleasure all the time. So I'm looking forward to Friday. Great way for us to start. Tough injury news to start with for CJ show today. John Tavares at the end of Leafs practice on Wednesday gets injured. I think it was a little bit of an awkward collision with Chris Tanev. It did not look good. What can you tell us about that situation? Do you have any update on John Tavares? And also just explain why this is not a good thing for the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Well, the Leafs still don't have the results of his MRI as we're recording this now. So, look for, I think, a little more clarity later at some point on Thursday on Tavares. But you're right. I mean, very strange kind of just fluke, accident, essentially. I mean, the Leafs were doing a small area game at the end of practice. It wasn't even a physical engagement, just more Tanev's skate kind of got stuck on Tavares' leg or foot and it pulled him in an awkward way down to the ice. Don't want to guess about what the injury is. Fair to say lower body. I don't know if it's knees or ankles or groins or something of that nature, but Tavares throws his gloves down and goes off the ice. I can say, prior to the results of the MRI being known, though, that there was at least some hope. Maybe this isn't super, super long term, which, is obviously good news if that ends up being the case for the Leafs, because Tavares has been one of their unsung heroes this year. And I know we've given him some props on this pod, but certainly if you're not dialed in with the team, you might not realize, to the degree they've leaned on him with Austin Matthews missing so much time. And he's really put together a nice offensive season for this team. And so you're kind of in this weird window right now where the Leafs probably are facing, unrelated to this specific injury or any other sort of, roster related news. This is probably the most heat the team's been under this season. They've dropped 3 games in a row for the first time all year. They haven't scored much in these last games. They've been booed off the ice against Vancouver on the weekend and then Dallas in their loss on Tuesday night. And so kind of the pressure cooker is going, starting to crackle around them, and, would not be a good time to lose a top centerman because, with the offense is one of the areas the Leafs, and again, in the very near term here, but, they've struggled to put the puck in the net, and that's one of the things that John Tavares has done so well for the Leafs this season.
So remember, I'm not in Toronto. I don't follow the Leafs the same way that everyone else in the CJ Show group chat does. The Tavares injury is very bad. That is a tough injury for them to swallow. But other than that, with the way that their season is going, yes, they had the booze. I saw Craig Berube react to that. We've joked about Steve Dangle and the Bumble word that he used. Like, I've said it already. This regular season doesn't matter. Like, when you see everyone react the way that they've been reacting these last few games, how do you really feel?
Well, I don't have any problem with the fans reacting the way they have. I mean, I think that's part of being a fan is riding the ups and downs, and this has been a down period. And, there's a lot of baggage here if you're a fan of a certain age.
Of course.
If you've been emotionally invested in the last 8 years of this team, I think that you could watch those games and infer, some of the things you didn't like in the past are coming back up again. I'm a little more steady in how I look at things. I do view it a little bit more as a dip in their play, the way most teams that go through a season are going to have from time to time. But I'm not going to sit here and say you shouldn't be angry or worried or concerned. I mean, those are all fair things. What I would be concerned about, more than just this moment is the power play. You go back a year's time now, a calendar year, 12 months. I think the Leafs are 21st in power play percentage in the NHL. So this isn't just a new or, short-lived, spike for them in the wrong direction. This has been a consistent problem. I don't know sometimes if people in the organization conveniently ignore that or just don't want to publicly acknowledge it, because you can look, yeah, sure. 3 years ago, I believe the Leafs were second in power play proficiency in the league with largely the same personnel they're using today for those minutes. But I mean, it's been a long time in a downturn, and they don't seem to have answers. Obviously, they keep going back and forth with 5 forward look, putting Riley back at the point. They just haven't scored enough with the man advantage. And I would think, to me, that's an area of concern in terms of, can they go farther in the playoffs? Where are the goals going to come from? I mean, it's really been goal scoring that seems to elude them when things go worse for this team. But I'm not going to look at 3 games and think the world's on fire and everything's ending. It's not to defend their performances. I'm not even looking for positives. I don't think it tells us enough big picture. Really, the truth is the teams that go deepest in the playoffs tend to have, there's the exceptions to this rule, but I'd say by and large, the teams that have a really strong finish to regular season tend to be those that go on long playoff runs. We've seen a team win the Stanley Cup that was almost out of the playoffs at this point in the season. Edmonton last year was among the worst teams in the league until they weren't. And so, I still think we'll be measuring the Leafs on what they are, specifically, February post 4 Nations, March and April into the playoffs. I mean, I think that'll tell us about their likelihood or their readiness to go on a playoff run or not. So I think this is a little bit of game 43, game 44 of the season. Like, how it's feeling this way around the league. Like, this isn't just a Toronto thing. I was talking to some of the Stars folks when they were in town this week. It's like, they're just in the grind of it too. This was the end of their team's longest road trip this season. They go home, they play 3 games in 4 days. Like, we're just in a little bit of the dog days in general, which again, it doesn't mean you can't react to performances, but personally, I'm not sounding any alarms based on this stretch. But, as I say, the power play is a huge concern for me. And then, just where the Leafs end up health-wise. I mean, it looks like Jake McCabe's coming back to the lineup. He's been a really big part of the blue line for the Leafs. That's for Thursday's game against New Jersey. As I mentioned, the initial hope is that it might not be too bad for Tavares, which would be good news. They're due to get Anthony Stolarz back relatively near future. He's supposed to be skating again on his own here. So, if they can get healthy and then what they do at the deadline will probably set them up for how we should really feel about them entering the playoffs.
Okay, I want to ask a power play question. I know every time we bring up Marc Savard, we bring up that power play, and ever since he's taken over, for whatever reason, just things don't work. You watch it a lot more than I do. what's the biggest thing that's wrong with it beyond the fact that they can't score consistently? Like, I'm very curious, and I would love to know your insights watching that power play.
I think when it's at its worst, they're too static on the outside and not doing enough to get the puck into the danger areas. You know, you can understand why it happens. I mean, the Leafs have really three playmakers on that power play, if you count Nylander, Marner in particular, and Matthews. You know, Tavares is used predominantly around the net looking for tips or rebound type goals. And then, you know, whether it's Riley or whatever you have at the point, I mean, but when it's going through Marner and going over the other wing to Nylander and you know, obviously teams are looking to take away Matthews' shot. You know, I can understand why those players try to get fancy. They have elite vision. They can do those perfect seam passes that lead to tap-in goals at times. But I do think when it doesn't work well, sometimes, you know, they're not controlling the puck. They're not driving it to the net. They're not creating chaos around the goaltender, getting enough of those rebounds. You know, that's where I see the issue. I think part of the problem too is everyone looks at it and goes like, "Hey, these guys have played together forever. They should know exactly what everyone's thinking. That should be an advantage." I think that can be a disadvantage too, because, you know, when you're working with the same people all the time and you're running into some familiar problems, I think it's hard to have new ideas, right? I mean, you fall back on what your natural tendencies are, and you know, maybe on some level, because teams heavily scout these things nowadays. I mean, I'm sure the Leafs are predictable. They just had similar personnel, similar setup, and there's not a lot of surprises out there. You know, so I don't know if there's one fix that I have for them. And if there was, I'd probably be getting paid a lot more money and I'd be on the coaching staff. You know, but I do think that the idea that they have to just throw more to the net and get in traffic. And honestly, I would consider this point. I think the struggles are deep enough going to say two sort of more balanced units, having those units even compete a little bit. I realize that might sound almost Mickey Mouse to some degree, but I think loading it all up with these same guys, it just is not producing results in the way over, again, what I consider to be a meaningful amount of time now, that just, you can't just assume it's going to fix itself. And so, you know, I realize that there's egos there. Obviously, all those players want their ice time. They want their cookies. Like, I get that it's a lot easier for us to sit here and say that than maybe to enact it. But I think that a fresh approach, you know, involving more regularly guys like Bobby McMahon, you know, Matthew Nyes, some other players, maybe Max Domi, you know, there might be, you know, you mix Oliver Ekman-Larsson in a little more meaningfully. I mean, he is on their second power play unit, but like a lot of teams, they don't really get to the power play two, usually with 15 seconds left and not when they have possession. I mean, usually those guys get such a small amount of time. It's hard to really judge the results. And so, you know, I would think more extreme at a certain point, because this isn't working. And I do think it should be a strength, ideally, when you have the kind of shooters and goal scorers they do. And it could be a differentiator from years past, even though those aren't new players. Same number, same names on the back of the sweaters. But if the Leafs had the 1 year they won a playoff series in 2023 against Tampa, they had a good power play in that playoffs. But most of the other years, if you look at it, they've been rotten. One power play goal last year in a 7-game loss to Boston, that, you know, game 7 overtime. They were 1 or 2 goals short in that series, and you just have to wonder if they could have found them on the power play. You know, maybe some of the pressure isn't to the degree it is because maybe they went on a playoff run in that alternate universe I'm now imagining.
I just wonder for this power play, like if the Leafs are busy for someone or ahead of the deadline, is there someone that they could get that could, like, I'm not saying you get like a power play specialist, but just somebody who has a penchant for just being able to work down low. Like, I think of the end of last season with the Flames, and when Marc Savard was still in charge of that power play, they had a lot of guys who were stuck on the fringes I thought there was like too many moments where the guys were static. But for whatever reason, Andrei Kuzmenko made a huge difference. And he's a guy who makes his living hanging around the goal line. And all of a sudden, you put him in that power play structure, and all of a sudden, the movement has gone from just going all over the offensive zone and just hanging around the perimeter to all of a sudden, there's this small window along the goal line and near the high danger areas where the Flames were actually seeing a little bit of success. Mind you, still not that great of a power play, but near the end of the year, they did see success with some kind of change there. And I wonder if maybe it's an internal situation, or maybe you go out and you get somebody. Like, maybe that's what you do, but like just the way that you were describing it, that just sounds very familiar from what I've seen from Marc Savard's power play.
Yeah, I don't know if there'll be an addition for that reason. I mean, they're focused. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk about it in the market on a third line type of center. I think that person isn't brought in just for defensive capabilities, but that'll probably be a pretty high, on the list of what that person brings when they acquire them. That will be one of the main things. It won't be maybe with such a focus on offense. I mean, look, there's still a lot of time between the deadline. I don't want to get too far down supposing what they may or may not do 7 weeks from now. But I guess there's a possibility. Look, they're in on John Klingberg too. He's coming back as a player coming off a significant hip surgery. Not to say at this point he's going to sign in Toronto, but if he signs in Toronto, one of the things Klingberg did really well, and they did sign him last year. Unfortunately, Klingberg was not very healthy. He played just 14 games in Toronto before having to have that hip surgery. But he was in his prime. It's certainly a smooth skater and an elite offensive weapon in terms of moving the puck, vision, and those types of things. I mean, power play was once his bread and butter. I'm not sure what version of him you're going to see again, and I'm not sure he's going to sign with the Maple Leafs. But if he does, there's maybe an example off the top of my head that he might start to get in on the power play, especially if they're in a mode where they're shaking it up, and maybe can help. Although I think it's also a lot to ask on a player who hasn't played a game since November 2023.
Absolutely. Well, not to mention, I mean, hey, I know he's recovering from hip resurfacing surgery, but that still sounds pretty serious. What else are you hearing about John Klingberg on the subject of him?
Well, he's seeking an opportunity with a competitive team. I think that's one of his priorities. I mean, look, he's going to sign a contract likely just for the remainder of this season. It's going to be one of those prove it deals. Because no team that can sign him, even John Klingberg himself, after doing all this work, he's 13 months deep now on extensive rehab work. Has been skating a lot the last few months. Is said to be feeling good, but he doesn't know how his body's going to withstand, getting back into the NHL environment. You want to be optimistic. You want to hope the best for him. He's got a pretty good proof of concept player in Patrick Kane, who, if you look at the year and a half since Kane has played for the Detroit Red Wings after his hip resurfacing procedure, he's actually scoring at a better point per game pace than the season prior to that surgery. Even though he's getting older, he's 36 now. So there's two ways of looking at it. There's been 4 players that have come back in the history and resumed an NHL career after hip resurfacing surgery. In a couple of cases, it didn't go too well. Nicholas Backstrom's one of them. He didn't have many more days in Washington after that point. He had to pack it in early last season. Ed Jovanovski many years ago didn't extend his career by much. Jesse Puljujarvi, is down now in the American Hockey League, but he resumed his career at Pittsburgh after that. I mean, I'd say that the jury's still out because he's playing pro hockey, and we'll see what can become of him. And then Patrick Kane. And so I look at those individual cases and say there's some hope there and there's some heartache. There's not a lot of guarantees. And so if you're John Klingberg, this is a chance to get in with a team, before the end of the season. As I said, he wants to play for a good team, a team, trending towards a playoff spot, and obviously one where there's an opportunity for him to play. And so, teams like Toronto, Edmonton, Ottawa, Dallas, where obviously has an extensive history, played most of his career with the Stars, are among those that have inquired about him. And, I think he's relatively close here to making a decision and determining the next step for his career. And so, what does he offer those teams? As I said, we don't know. It's a bit of a mystery bucket, right? Mm-hmm. But, the beauty for them is I'd say he's going to come relatively cheap on the cap. You're signing him for the rest of this season. It can be a contract that includes performance bonuses because he missed so much time last year. He qualifies under the CBA. And so, that's a way for him and the team to mitigate some risk. If he comes in, he plays great, he puts up points or whatever performance buckets go in that contract, then he can make more money. But if, for whatever reason, he's not able to perform up to, the level he's hoping, then you don't have to pay him as much. So I think it's relatively low risk for any of these teams. And it's a bit of a wait and see. What do you get? But, I think it's pretty intriguing just because, as I mentioned, at his best, Klingberg was, a high-end puck-moving defenseman. He's still only 32. He's a right shot, and you can acquire him right now for whatever you pay him. There's no, all these same teams, those ones I just mentioned, they're all going to be in the market for a defenseman at the trade deadline if they don't sign Klingberg. And maybe even if one of them does sign Klingberg, they might still be trading for another defenseman. So this is an asset you can add just for the cost of whatever the contract ends up being. And so that's why he's drawing a lot of interest. I think that there's real hope there that he can be something, but until we see him in a uniform and playing games and really putting his body, pushing at a level that you can't really do, I don't think, even with all the work he's been doing in suburban Toronto, it's hard to know what he's going to be.
So if you lose out on the John Klingberg sweepstakes, David Savard potentially, Ivan Provorov is out there too. I've just been going through your trade board. There's still quite a few defensive options out there, Siege.
Yeah, Rasmus Ristolainen, a right shot. You got Will Borgen, who was traded for by the Rangers, and who may or may not be flipped. I don't know that it's a foregone conclusion, but he is a pending UFA. The Rangers have actually kind of righted the ship of late, and so we'll have to see what decisions their management makes if they stay in the playoff race. With players like Borgen, who is on an expiring deal. But yeah, there's definitely some players out there that can help some of these teams. I think Toronto, Edmonton, Dallas for sure, probably in the market for players that can play on the right side. I know Edmonton, they don't want to box themselves in and say it has to be a right shot. I think that they want to be open-minded about what the market could yield. But it makes sense. I think the Senators would make sense too. So that's probably why those are among the teams that we're hearing are most interested in Klingberg now as a potential signing. Interesting note on Provorov is, I'm starting to get the feel that there is a chance he extends in Columbus. He still appears on the trade board, and those contract discussions haven't really got going in a meaningful way yet between the Blue Jackets and his agents. But my sense is Provorov is very, very open to staying with the Blue Jackets. He's got a brother who's committed to going to Ohio State to play hockey, a younger brother. So he's got a brother that's going to live in the city. He likes it there. I think he's found a good opportunity playing big minutes. Obviously, it's been a really, amazing year for the Blue Jackets. I think, basically everyone had them tabbed for 31st or 32nd, and here they are in a wild card spot. So, I'm not saying that's necessarily impacting his decision, but it certainly has been a better season than you might have imagined around Columbus. And so, I don't think the Jackets are necessarily going to extend to maximum market value. And so we'll have to see where the contract negotiations go. If they can get a first round pick for him and they're worried about, the cost it's going to be to sign him, then, there's still a world he's traded, but I would just caution, assuming that's going to happen. I would have assumed it back in October, November, when I was sort of projecting the Blue Jackets to be at the bottom of the standings. He was obviously a pretty attractive piece to sell, but I do think there's a world here where Provorov does stay in Columbus, pending how those contract talks go when they get started, and they're supposed to start here pretty soon.
Okay, let's move on to the Pittsburgh Penguins. Tristan Jarry put on waivers on Wednesday. We've talked about him on this podcast before. He had that conditioning stint early on this year, and now this happens. How did the Pittsburgh Penguins get here?
Well, it's just a reflection of how badly things have gone. One of Kyle Dubas's first big decisions after he became the president and ultimately the general manager of the Penguins was signing Jarry to this 5-year extension. Last year didn't go well. By the time the Penguins were playing big games down the stretch last year, it was Alex Nedeljkovic carrying the mail in net. Jarry wasn't the main guy. This year starts. He's immediately pushed aside again after a couple rough starts. He goes through that conditioning stint where he really was very good in Wilkes-Barre, but it just hasn't been good enough since then. He hasn't played up to the level they expect, and I know Dubas is telling the reporters in Pittsburgh, let's not write any obituaries just yet. There's been goalies that have bounced back. The writing's on the wall here. I think that's an unlikely outcome. Not to say that it can't happen again, but the odds of it happening in Pittsburgh seem less and less likely. This is not the preferred route to take with a player you have just signed to a big 5-year deal. He's not even halfway through that contract. And, this is running a flag up the flagpole. For anyone who hadn't noticed how bad of a decision that was, this is a reminder. Hey, look, we made a poor judgment on this player and we're in desperate straits here. So, they got here in pretty short order after signing that contract, but he hasn't been able to live up to it. They've tried, going a couple routes, I think, to get his play up to a better level. And now he's got to go down to the American Hockey League and try to work his way back. And, I'll take Kyle Dubas at his word in this. I mean, if there's an injury for one of the other goaltenders, if Jarry goes down and plays great, there is a world, of course, he's back in the Penguins net. But, he's down to his final strike, I think, in Pittsburgh. And, they'll have to look at something like a buyout perhaps, or maybe there's a poison pill type of trade where they're giving up an extra asset to trade him or something. But, I think that this is getting pretty close to the end of the road for him with the Penguins.
$5.375 million cap hit for Tristan Jarry. That is not an easy salary to take even if you are a team out there that is in need of some kind of goaltending help. Like the stats don't justify it for me if I'm a GM.
Yeah, it's funny. There's been a lot of bad contracts given out around that number. But, with goaltenders making $5 million, $5.5 million, you go back to the Jack Campbell deal in Edmonton was in that range. Elvis Merzlikins has struggled a lot of his time in Columbus since getting that sort of deal. Cal Peterson, you'll remember, got that kind of contract in LA, and they ended up having to dump him to Philadelphia. He's in the AHL. It just feels like there's some bad vibes around goalies who get something like 5 times 5, or even a little bit above that level. I don't know why that is of late, but it seems like some of the most damaging contracts of that position have been handed out around those numbers.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we've run through a good chunk of news of the day. I want to do this one fun thing with you before we get to your stick tap. There's been a lot of talk about the Calder Trophy candidates. It seems as if there's 4 of them that have stood out. Lane Hutson, Macklin Celebrini, Matvei Michkov, and Dustin Wolf out in Calgary. Unless there's another one you feel should be a part of that conversation. I'd like for you, CJ, to rank those 4 from most likely to win the Calder to least likely among those 4 right now. Obviously, this list can change.
Well, Celebrini is at the top of the list for me right now. I think that, his impact in San Jose has been undeniable. What's going to potentially hurt him or be brought up as the Sharks themselves as a team are kind of going nowhere fast right now. They're not going to, they're not going to be playing meaningful games down the stretch. And so I think that does open the window if, Lane Hutson keeps going in the direction he has, where, certainly I think you've seen a bump in results from him of late. And obviously the Canadians have been winning games. They could be a team that makes the playoffs, and he's playing a huge role at a young age on their blue line. Maybe he gets some consideration. Dustin Wolf, I'd say, is similar. He started to take over more than half the games and starts in Calgary, and the Flames are at this present time around the wild card spot. And so, if he starts playing even more games down the stretch and it's at the level he's been at and they make the playoffs, I mean, some of those narrative based things I think could get in there. And I'm not trying to overlook Michkov either. He's sort of cooled off a little bit offensively, in recent weeks here, but big picture, I mean, he's got 3 overtime winners already this season. We've seen him do some pretty magical things. And so, this is a great thing for the NHL. It's a great thing for these teams because these guys are the big 4, I would say, in terms of just, they are cut above the other rookies to this point in the league. And I think it's going to be a hotly contested Calder race. So, right now it's hard for me to, I guess I'm probably going Celebrini, Hudson, Wolf, Michkov. I guess. Okay. I'm not doing it with a lot of conviction. I do have conviction though of the 4 through what we've seen through January, 15th. Celebrini, I do feel pretty confident would be my number 1 vote. But this is the beauty, and is that it will be a little more, I think they'll be a little more clear as we get towards the end of the season, where this goes. And what's interesting too, is you're talking about 2 forwards, a defenseman and a goalie. You don't always get that variety of position. And obviously you're not comparing apples to apples in that case. And you have to weigh different factors. Who's the last goalie to win Rookie of the Year? Is it Steve Mason?
Didn't Andrew Raycroft win?
Steve Mason would have been after him. I'm pretty sure he was the last, but it's pretty rare for a goalie to get in this award. But Wolf clearly has that chance because you're starting to see him take the net for the Flames. You know, his numbers are tremendous. He's, the guy wins goalie of the year everywhere he plays, whether it was in the Western League or in the American Hockey League a couple times. He is the rare goalie that I could see. Like, weirdly, I have him as, like, if it was like a horse race, I'd be like, man, keep an eye on him on the backstretch, because a lot of things are lining up, I think, that are going to give him a chance to actually, get in the mix and win that award.
Yeah, if he gets the Flames into the playoffs, like, there's a big chance you could even say he wins it. Like, the fact that the Flames are in the position that they're in right now, I mean, at the time that we're recording this, we are doing this before some games, the Flames are actually in a wild card spot right now. And they've given Dustin Wolf the lion's share of the last few games they've played in terms of starts. Like, I know that, like, Craig Conroy, I think,
feels like they're turning him loose a little bit lately. You know what I mean? Like, it feels like at the beginning he's on a pitch count a little bit. They don't want to overdo it. He's a smaller guy, like all those things. He's adjusting to the league. But now it's like, oh shit, he's just too good. We got to keep playing him.
That's it. I spoke to Craig last week, Craig Conroy, the general manager of the Flames, and he mentioned the fact that he likes the tandem that he has with Wolf and Dan Vladar, and he doesn't want Dustin Wolf to be in a situation where he's playing like 55, 60 games, which I get is like a dying breed anyway, but like he likes having that tandem. But considering where this team is at, considering the stakes that are there for them, Dustin Wolf has been playing really well, and he's even starting to get wins away from home. Like, you have to play him, and I think that's great for him, and that's only going to help his Calder Trophy case. Like, I think for a lot of people, like, they should start paying more attention out west to see what this guy's like. Like, he's playing really well. He's really confident, very athletic, and I think you can make an argument he's the biggest reason why the Flames are still relevant.
I was chatting with someone recently who's not associated with the Flames, and so they were sort of a neutral observer. But one thing that they'd said is they've heard about Wolf was that he has like tremendous sort of hockey IQ, which is, what's interesting about that is you hear that thrown around a lot, of course, about players, skaters generally, the way they see the ice maybe, or plays developing. You don't always think of it as goalies in that same way, because it is such a different position. But let's call it as it is. He's one of the few guys who isn't a giant too in the crease. I mean, if anything, you're seeing goalies be 6'6", 6'7" in some cases. Certainly not a lot of guys below 6'3" in the league, but Dustin Wolf is the outlier in that regard. I don't know exactly what he's listed at and what the truth is. I just know I know he's on the shorter end of the stick among NHL goaltenders, and he's managed to perform at this level too. So I think that he's interesting in a lot of ways because he's not the typical goalie, working his way into the league, and he's had such huge success to start his NHL career here. 6 feet,
and the NHL.com website lists him at 166 pounds. Like, it's one thing for him to have the height, but like,
what's Lane Hudson listed at? I know he's not a big man either.
He's got to be 5'8", 106, like 170 or something like that. Like, also, I'll say this for Lane Hudson too, because if I were to do this list, I think Lane Hudson should be number one. I think just the way that he's been able to take over games as this high flying skating defenseman who is gifted offensively. Like, a couple of days ago, I watched that Canadiens Canucks game that went to overtime. He's flying around and he's like making offense happen. Like, this isn't just some guy who has like nice little bit of edge work. Like, he's the best defenseman on that team. And kind of similar to what we were saying with Dustin Wolf, where like you can make an argument he could be the reason why they're why they're relevant in this playoff race. Maybe a bit of an argument with Lane Hudson, but I think he has a very much a big case to be the biggest reason why the Canadiens are where they're at too. Like, I think he's been incredible for this team this last stretch of games where they've found a way to defend and play well. You might get the old Erik Karlsson argument with him though, like that he's got to find his own end a little more. And look, he absolutely does. If you're being compared to Erik Karlsson that soon in your career, that's not a bad thing. We're talking about a guy who won multiple Norris trophies and all this stuff. But, like there was always a debate early in his career about how you measure the offensive impact against, maybe some of the defensive deficiencies or lacking. I don't have a strong take on that at this point. I'm just saying it's going to be part of the conversation, I think, with Hudson when people really have to consider this award. By the way, you're right. Steve Mason is the last goaltender to win Calder the Calder Trophy.
Woo!
Your brain.
The one rare time I found the answer, like without us having to boot it around for 12 minutes and then get a bunch of replies.
Thank God.
Do you know what?
We should also. Yeah,
I'm midway through dry January.
Yes.
And I'm functioning at a high level. I think that this might be a dry January. My brain's like locked in on these details.
Telling you, man, you're sharp. You're with it. You always are, but like you got it. Dry January, man. I get it. It works. We should mention though, like Matvei Michkov and Macklin Celebrini, all world rookie talents. By the way,
hey, I gave Celebrini my first vote, so yes, I don't need to be selling him any more than I already did.
But it's fat. But like, I don't know if you realize this. Say they're tied on points and assists and goals. Like they're right there statistically. Both those players. Like this might be the toughest. If everything continues the way that it's going, this might be the toughest rookie of the year ballot to file. Like I can't think of how many other years have we had? How many? Like it's definitely happened before, but how many times can we say there's a genuine debate to be had about who should be winning that award and everyone else on that ballot?
There's enough. Like the McDavid year was hard because he got injured, and I think a lot of people, like to me. What is it? The Calder Trophy is the trophy adjudged to be the best rookie in the league, essentially. And I was like, come on. Connor McDavid was the best rookie in the league. I know he only played 40 odd games because of this, but some people, it's not always clear cut, is I guess what I'll say. Panarin year was tough for some people because he was, he played professionally in the KHL and, some people get all worried about ages, I'll say this in this year's class, no one is going to have a bigger hype man than Celebrini because Draymond Green is all over hype and Celebrini, which that part, I don't know if anyone can keep up with that. I mean, Draymond's really got his guys back, which I respect.
Love that. I love that poll. Could you imagine if you're the San Jose Sharks and you're trying to get everyone to think about their ballots and you're getting Draymond Green all over your promo videos telling you why there's a free idea for them, isn't it? That's a free idea. Draymond Green has a whole podcast. He could dedicate 5 minutes in a segment or two on Macklin Celebrini. That's a free idea. I like that.
I mean, some teams just prepare like PDFs or whatever, like they put together information packages to highlight why certain, members of their team deserve consideration for a certain award. They send that around to the voting members, but yeah, you could take this public. You could go real big, and let's face it, everything that important happens on social media these days. So Draymond Green's got all his own channels there to get that message out loud and clear.
Love that. Okay, so your list officially: Celebrini,
Hudson, Wolf,
Michkov, Matvei Michkov. Who Insider J Money is not going to be happy about that, but I mean, there's a reason why I said this list could change because Matvei Michkov is a sick rookie. I've
had to stifle this because you always want to ask me these questions, and they're good.
Of course I do.
They're good discussion, but like my standard answer would be is like we're literally not voting on this for 3 months. So like what I said January 15th only has so much importance. That's just how I see it today. But like let's watch 3 more months of games, and it's literally around mid-April when we're going to actually be voting on these awards. So
100%. Do you have it? I mean, we mentioned top 4. Typically for ballots, you have 5. Is there like a 5th rookie that is deserving of? I mean, they're not in the top 4, but like, who would be the 5th on your ballot essentially?
I haven't prepared enough, so I don't want to just throw out a name and then.
That's okay. I was just curious.
I am comfortable with those guys being the big 4, though. I mean, I think 100%. Most ballots, if they had to be cast today, with those, that would be the top 4 on most ballots in some order.
Before we get out of here, stick taps. I have mine already. You can piggyback on mine if you want, but I would love to know if you have a stick tap for this week.
Well, I'm a sucker for a story like this, so I'm going to go with Ethan Frank, who was recalled by the Washington Capitals, undrafted player, was part of the Hershey Bears' last 2 Calder Cup wins, gets called up to the Capitals at age 26 and has points in his first 3 games in the NHL. He talked to the reporters there about growing up in Nebraska with an Alex Ovechkin fat head on his wall, and how he's kind of, just has to pinch himself and live in the dream. And so, good story of perseverance, Again, not being drafted and carving out a really strong career in the AHL. He was a big part of those Calder Cup wins. He wasn't just along for the ride, and then gets the call up to Washington, and he's chipped in with some points. I think he was one of 6 players in Capitals history with points in their first 3 NHL games. Among those he joined are Ovechkin. So in rarefied air, don't know what lies ahead, but that's a pretty cool story. A big week for him, and the Caps needed his offense, so he's been helping out.
Man, that Alexander Ovechkin goal chase. The Caps are in Ottawa on today, Thursday. So let's see if it continues. What day did you say? Did you think he was going to break it?
I can't. April? I don't remember the date I said.
Okay,
but I think it's in April. Like I don't think I don't think it happens before then. Keeping in mind we're going to lose 2 weeks in February to the Four Nations face-off as well. So
yeah, at some point I'll do a dumpster dive in the archives and find the date, or someone in the CJ Show chat will do that. Thanks so much to everyone for tapping in. Thank you again to everybody.
Wait, you didn't give your.
My stick tap was at the beginning of the show. It's for everyone who bought tickets to the. Okay. That's what I said at the beginning. That's why I said I don't normally do stick taps at the beginning.
I thought it was like a rare 2 stick tap day. I thought you were just going to be spreading the love around, my friend.
I only have so much love to give, Big Money CJ. I only have so much love to give.
Well, save yourself up for a big trip to Cobourg on Friday, my man.
Oh, I am. I can't wait for the drive. I can't wait to see everybody. I can't wait to see how everyone gravitates to you, man. Like. Hometown hero, man back in his hometown.
I've heard rumors, and they're unsubstantiated this time, that Cobourg Papa might get some sort of VIP table. That there might be some that there might be some sort of like don't sit here reserved for Cobourg Papa table. So I don't know if he's bringing security or what, but
I need to see this with my own eyes.
I know he's bringing some friends, which is cool.
They might make him mayor by the end of the night, depending on how things go.
He couldn't take the pay cut.
Love it. I'm looking forward to meeting the legend, man. I'm looking forward to meeting the legend.
First time, eh?
Yeah, I've never been to Cobourg. I'd never met your dad, so I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, it's going to be good. It's feeling real now. Some of the anxiety I expressed on Monday has gone away now that it's happening. It's sold out. I've gotten a few things off my plate that were getting in the way of my brain mentally, and so I'm all ready to give it on Friday night. Can't wait.
Let's do it, man. We're gonna make sure we have all the fun we can possibly with the crowd who pulls up at Boston Pizza Cobourg in Cobourg. Again, we're really
1111 Elgin Street West.
Hey, look at you pulling up the address. Look at you pulling up that address. Oh yeah, man. Get there around 5:00. That's when the vibe should get going, and then the podcast starts at 6. And then after we're done, we'll hang out for a little bit longer. So we'll see you all on Friday. Get your questions in for Monday's show, and we'll talk to you all at the live show on Friday. Be there or be there.
The Chris Johnston Show. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris and follow Julian @JKA McKenzie.
The Chris Johnston Show.